Well, now that I've got the Jeep running, driving, and even stopping, and it's doing everything I need to do, it's time to start tackling the little things. So today, I'm going to focus on the headlights and get those working again. So, start off, I'll have to rip out all this old wiring. It's all disconnected from what I have ran new anyway, so there's no power ran to it. And for good reason. I mean, there's more than a few spots where insulation, I guess that's not a good one because there's still another jacket underneath, it looks like, but a few spots, especially down here, I think you can see that, where insulation's ripping away, and that's no good. So just gonna rip all that out, replace it with new stuff, new headlights, and yeah, you know, all the switches, the bright switch or dimmer switch, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, so I'll get all that knocked out and start out by just tearing everything out. So it's always a good idea when you're getting ready to tear something out, especially if you're going to replace it, to just kind of get a good idea of how everything's ran, so you can reuse, you know, factory clips and other things like that, just to make sure everything's clear and out of the way. And additionally, it gives you a better idea of just how to go about disassembling it, because sometimes knowing how to take it apart makes it easier to put it back together, if you could imagine that. And yeah, so I'll go ahead and start. I'm gonna start by working from the headlights back, I think. I think that will work best for me. So I'll rip out the old bezels here, pop the headlights out, and then disconnect them from the wiring, and yeah, just kind of get a good idea of what it looks like in these buckets. Well, that did it. There's one. Well, that one was easy. Headlight bezels are removed. So next I'll just have to pop the these little stainless rings off, and then that'll let me pull the headlight bucket out, and or I guess, I don't know what you call that, just headlight bulb, but be able to pull that whole thing out and disconnect the wires from it and get those out of the way. And then I'll, I guess I'll get the full scope of exactly what I'm working with. So this here is the actual headlight bucket. So this, you use these screws to basically adjust it, and that's how you get your headlight alignment. And so trying to decide if I want to pop those out to get better access, or if I just want to say to heck with it. So, I mean, I got my ground screw there anyway. I can probably just make what I have work and not worry about throwing these off, because then it's really, it'll be a lot, I guess not a lot harder to get it back into adjustment, but just more work. And if I can avoid it, it's worth avoiding, I think. And I'll clean this all up too while I'm in here. And just get all the dirt out, make it, I guess, clean. Looks like I might have a little bit of rot in the bottom of this one, but that's not a big deal. It's just got to hold the headlight in. Extra drainage, I suppose, but yeah, I'll clean it up and everything, and yeah, get new headlights in. So I guess now that I've seen what I'm working with here, I'll probably just cut the ends off, because I actually have new connectors I'll show you later on to replace all this. And yeah, just make sure that ground screw comes out, and maybe wire wheel back there a little bit just to clean it up. I'm gonna start there, do that, cut that out, and follow everything down to this distribution block. And that one broke out, screw snapped. So I'm thinking I might be able to just remake something that's, you know, new clips versus reusing them, but you know, we'll see. Might even look online because I can always add them after the fact. It's not like they're hard to add. And I definitely got to do some sort of repairs or something to that area. But yeah, so now that I got the first round of wires, or the first section of wires off, I'll disconnect them at this junction box, or junction block rather, and keep moving backwards. And from here it's really just got my dimmer switch, or your bright switch, whatever you want to call it, the wires to the light switch itself, and I've got this little bright indicator here, high beam indicator. So I think there really isn't much wiring involved, but we'll see here in a minute. Now we'll see if I'm able to get the dimmer switch out. Just the two screws. Other than it being in a very awkward position, it shouldn't be too bad, but let's see. I was able to get the dimmer switch out. I just left the wires connected. Looks like when I reconnect everything, probably gonna want to run the wires and connect it to this first rather than trying to screw it in down there. So that's definitely something easier to plan ahead now than to think about it later. But yeah, so I'll replace that dimmer switch. As you can see, that's some of the corroded wiring I was talking about. Just insulation's totally gone. That's just asking for a short. So now that that's done, I'll clip it at the firewall here. And the firewall forward wiring has been removed. So go ahead and put it with the rest of it. And now it's just doing the last disconnecting under the dash, pulling out the old switch, and just the high beam indicator as well. And all the old wiring should be done, or should be removed, and then I can start planning out my circuits and getting the new stuff installed. The headlight switch and the rest of the old wiring is now removed. As you can see, it's pretty crusty. Definitely needed replaced. But now that that's done, that's all the old wiring removed. So now it's just a matter of planning out the new circuits and getting the new stuff built. Now that I've got all the parts to wire up the headlights, I'm going to go ahead and figure out how they all go together to make the headlights work. So I've got this piece of paper here, and I hope to draw everything out and sort of just draw up my own wiring diagram, figure out where I need wires, what I need them for, and see how it goes. So let's go ahead and get started. So to start off building the circuit, I figure it'll be best to work from the thing we're actually powering and work backwards to the power supply itself. So of course with the headlight circuit, the thing that we're actually powering is the two headlights. And so we'll go ahead and start there by drawing two headlights, just as, please excuse my drawing, but we just need two headlights. God, that's not very good. That's all right. And then they have three branches of power coming off of them. One of them is our ground. So you'll see a lot of times in wiring diagrams, they're marked by basically three hash marks running perpendicular to a line. And so that designates ground. So ground's easy. You just hook that wire into the body itself, and it works to create or to finish the DC circuit. And then of course our other two branches are going to be our high beam and our low beam off the headlight. And so now that we have that situated, I have these three plugs, or these three bladed plugs that came with, or that I ordered, that actually plug into the headlights. So I'll have to figure out which plug goes to what in order to designate which wire will power. Once I have this plug sorted out, which wires go to where, the high and low beams will ride through this little junction box. Basically it works to, I don't know if a junction box is the right word, but essentially you run one power lead in, which connects to two power leads that go out into each headlight. Following that, we have our high beam indicator. So this mounts to the floor and lets you switch between your high and low beams. And then of course the thing that powers, or the thing that controls it all, is the actual light switch that I'll have to unplug and everything. But this goes directly into the dash, which is all fed by a single circuit from the battery. And since I don't have a fuse panel set up for any circuits that are just the full 12 volts without a switch, I'll have to run a little jumper fuse inside the circuit, which isn't a big deal. I just want to make sure it's protected. And as long as I know it's there, it's not hard to check. So yeah, let me go ahead and get everything else drawn up and we'll start plugging everything in. Alright, it's not pretty, but I've gone ahead and drawn out all the different components of the circuit out onto the piece of paper. So of course here you got your headlights, then the junction box I discussed before. Here's your high-low beam switch. Forgot to label it, but this is the headlight switch. Here's the fuse 12-volt source, and then I forgot to mention these before, but it's the high beam indicator, which is just this little light sort of thing on the dash that lights up when the high beams are on, and then the indicator for the gauges. So this is that little lamp thing that shines down on the outside of all the gauges on the dash. So now that I've got all this drawn up, next is figuring out just how all the wires go together to make this work. So I'm going to start by working backwards. So I'll indicate this one on either headlight as the high beam. And then I'll do low beam. So got those indicated, and now so I'll run these. So the low beams both need to go to the same lug on the junction box. Or it's not a box, but rather junction piece. We'll do the same with the high beams. Now when I do this in actual practice, what I want to do is use different colored wires, which will help indicate to me which goes where and help make things a little bit easier, especially when it comes to servicing. And you'll notice there's a lug here that I'm not using. This is for the marker lights that appear on the front. But since I'm not worrying about them for now, I'm just not going to worry about wiring it up. So now that we've got that done, my next step is going to the headlight dimmer switch for the high-low beam. And so I want to figure out exactly which lug goes to where. See if I can get some sort of indication on the part itself. It doesn't look like it, but I'm imagining just by the looks of it, power goes in to both these lugs, which then this switch picks whether it goes to this one or that one. So it shouldn't really matter. I just need to pick a lug. So I'll indicate this bottom one is the main power lug and the other one's the different beams. So we'll run the low beams over here to one and the high beams to the other. And then now we'll run the main power out to the headlight switch itself. And we're going to want to check this out. We're going to want to check the switch out next and see if there's anything we can indicate as far as what goes where. It doesn't look like it at a glance. I mean, this is power from the battery, so I guess we'll go ahead and indicate that now. So this is our fused 12-volt source. It powers everything. We don't want it to be switched. We want it to have power all the time, direct from the battery, so that even when the key isn't on, I can turn the headlights on and off, and eventually, when I do get to the point of brake lights, I'll be able to turn those, or those will work, even if the key's off, which obviously you always want those to work. And so I'm not quite sure yet. So I'll look into that after the fact when I'm off camera, but I'll just run this to one of the lugs for now. So we'll run it, I guess, to this one. And then on top of that, we've also got our dash light and our high beam indicator. So the high beam indicator, we're going to want to power off of whichever one goes. Okay, so we'll want to hook it to the high beam lug, and so we'll want it to be powered off of that. And then we've also got our dash light. And since that one is, we want it to go switch on right as we have power, we're going to want to put it, we want it to switch on whenever we turn the headlights on. We're going to want to put it on the same lug as the headlights. And with that, that should complete the basics of the circuit, and at least give you an idea of where to go and kind of show you how to put a circuit together. And yeah, so you'll see with a lot of these, they don't have any sort of grounds. So the thing is once they're connected to the dash plate, they'll actually ground themselves. The body of the piece is what grounds it. And so I guess that's in case you don't know that. But yeah, now that I've got that done, I'll get back out to the vehicle and start doing the actual assembly. Now that everything's all cleaned up and removed, I can go ahead and start getting all the new parts installed and making the headlights work. So one of the things I got to focus on is, or not really focus, but remember, is here's the old plug I took out, and I'm replacing these. And so I got to make sure that I put the ground on the same one, and then the other two wires are power to high beams, power to low beams. So I can switch those back and forth on this to figure out which goes where if I don't already have it figured out at the switch itself. Getting ready to do the high-low or dimmer switch, or whatever you want to call it. It goes down on the floor for changing, turning brights on and off. And so before I get that installed, since I don't want to deal with trying to screw terminals in once that's all down there, I'm going to get those installed now. I've gone ahead and gotten the dimmer switch or bright switch, whatever you want to call it, wired up. So now I'll be able to just drop it in or drop it down there and put the 2 screws in. I've got 4 wires coming off of it. I thought I was only going to have to do 3. Power to the lights and then switching between, high or low. And I forgot that I also have a bright indicator light on the dash, so I needed to run a signal wire for that. So that's what this white one is. And so when power is fed to the brights, power will also be fed to the signal to make it shine. And so simple as that for the indicator. So now that that's done, I will go ahead and get this installed. Just like that, the dimmer switch is installed. So up here is where that indicator goes, so I'll have to remember to wire that up. But yeah, that was definitely the right move there. That would have been a little difficult reaching down in there and trying to connect those, let alone in the right spot. So I think I'm going to go ahead and start running the wiring this way forward for now and get the headlights done. Once all that's complete, I'll focus on putting these wires through the firewall and I'll obviously put a grommet there. And yeah, get the rest of the wiring done back to the battery and make the headlights work. So I'm going to keep picking away at this, and I'll catch up with you in a little bit then. Got the headlight plugs all installed. Wiring's hooked up and ran. Ground is installed. New grommets. And for now, I'm eventually going to use some wire wrap and tidy this up a lot. But for now, I just zip tied it in place to hold it. And so all that, and then loops down, connects to the junction box. So that's all ran. So now about everything firewall forward is ran. The high-low switch is hooked up, junction box, wiring to the headlights, plugs for the headlights. So now I'll stick a grommet through this hole and I'll work on running both the bright indicator light or indicator light signal wire and the power to the headlights wire. And so I just got to run that through a switch and then run that through a fused circuit to the battery. And from there, yeah, it should be able to hook it up. The few other things, the bright indicator I was just talking about, and I have a new light socket thing to replace that. So I've got the wiring through on the firewall, and so I guess next step is to get my headlight switch hooked up. And so I had to look it up, and I figured out which lugs go where, so you can kind of see it there. I think it's focusing, yeah. So you got an H, an A, a B, and an R. Yep, there's the R. And so basically, the H is headlights, A is accessory, R is running lights, and then B is battery, which carries over to this thing, which I believe looks to be a 30 amp, probably like capacitor or something. But anyway, so my yellow wire, I will run to the H, and then I'm gonna have to do an additional wire. Then I'm gonna run to the gauge light, and then that will go on the A lug. And then after that, I'll have to run a wire to a battery power source, which I'm just gonna use the battery side of the key and run a wire from there to these headlights. And that will complete the headlight circuit. Then one other thing I want to talk about is I'm about to install the high beam indicator. There's the hole for it. As you can see, you can probably see, it is pretty rusty. So I'm going to do a quick sanding job on that to ensure that it has a nice ground and everything, and the light works as needed, and there's not any issues there. So once I get that knocked out, I'll show you a quick trick too that kind of just ensures that you got a solid ground and you're not going to run into any issues there. Now that I have the backside sanded nicely and installed, it should have a solid ground. But just to confirm that, I'm going to use my multimeter. So I guess you got to have a multimeter or at least some sort of continuity tester to do this, but switch it to that mode. I forget. I think continuity is what it's called. Anyway, it just, when it beeps, it tells you that there's a circuit complete between the two wires. And so I'm going to run one probe all the way to the indicator light. As you can see there, the body of that is a conductor, so I should be able to hold that there. And the other one I'm going to run all the way over here to the battery, as that more or less confirms that it's got a solid ground. Ooh, are my arms just long enough? Oh, I gotta catch it. I'm gonna have to use something else, unfortunately. Just too short. I'll use the one end of the ground wire here. As you can see, or might be able to see, I'm sitting here on the ground wire, and I'm also sitting on the housing of the bright indicator. So that confirms I got a solid ground. I'm not going to have any issues there. So now that that's complete, back to putting this switch in and pull out that old gauge light and replace it with this brand new one I have. Get the wiring set up for that, and yeah, that'll be about it. I want to get all the wires I'm going to connect to the switch ready and hook them up before I mount the switch. So I guess I need to get the gauge light swapped. So I'm going to knock that out and also take care of cutting and connecting the high beam indicator and putting this light in onto this wire. So I'm going to get those things knocked out and catch up with you after that. Well, I've gone ahead and hooked up the headlight switch, got all the wires connected, power to the headlights, power to the switch, the power to the indicator light, power to the gauge light. So everything should be working as intended now. And since that's done, went ahead and plugged in the headlights. Obviously bezels aren't mounted and everything, so they're just dangling, but since it grounds, it doesn't ground to the bucket itself, it's got a connection. So shut these lights off and put it to the real test. And there we go. Just like that, headlights turn on. Can't tell if this indicator light's working. Maybe that's hooked up wrong, but it doesn't look like that's working. Let's see if the high beams, if I can find it. That's switching, and that light's turning on. So I just got to make sure I have them hooked up the correct way. Can't tell if this is high or low. I'm guessing. Seems like that's high beams. So I got a wire I got to flip around there, but that's not a big deal. Well, I did a little flip-flopping and some work, and I was able to get all the lights working. Might be hard to tell. This one's on, but that indicator's working now. So to get this working, I figured out when I had it pulled halfway in accessory, it was working then, of course, because that's what I had it wired to. When I really should have had it to running lights, because, you know, when you have the headlights on, this is kind of one of the lights you want running, and I should have accounted for that, but didn't think about it. So that's fixed now. And then high beam indicator. Just had to switch the signal wire to the other side of the high beam switch. And now that's red when the high beams are on. So now that all that's taken care of, I'm going to go ahead and get the bezels and all that hooked back up, and I think that'll be it. Headlights will be all finished up. Now that the headlights are installed and bezels are on, and the accessory lights are functioning as they should be, all that's really left is cleaning up. I'll eventually do a more permanent mounting on this. I also need to do the marker lights, and might figure out what I'm going to do for the clips here. If I might just buy, I can probably just buy new ones that were like the factory ones online. So that'll probably be my plan of attack there, but we'll see. But anyway, the wiring, it turned out pretty good. I'm pretty confident in it. Shouldn't have any issues. Everything's functioning as it should. I can't remember if I mentioned it or not. I think I did in the planning of the circuits, but I put a fuse in here. Can't really pull it down, but my mentality was I'll be able to pull it down if I pull the light switch down. And if I'm having issues with the lights, I'll probably have to pull the switch down anyway, and it only takes a minute. So I figured it was better to put it on that side rather than over by the key where I have the power feeding to the circuit for the lights. But yeah, anyway, since cleaning's all that's left, I think I'll take care of that off camera and call this a video. So I appreciate you watching. I should have some more stuff coming up soon. Obviously, this is a project that needs a lot of work still. So I got some suspension things I'm going to do. I think I need to do some work to the steering. Maybe a wheel bearing on the one side I need to take a look at. Or maybe even just the steering knuckle thing down there. But yeah, it's an ongoing project, so I should have more stuff coming up. So thanks again, and have a good one.